What's going on, YouTube? Culturedog Sam Hatch back with another video. Feels like I've been away for a while, but I really haven't. I just did a ton of videos at the beginning of the month and then took a while to edit them and slowly stream them out. So, in the middle of a superstorm going on right now, got nothing else to do, stuck here in the snow, figure it's a good time to start talking about some Laserdisc and finally complete my collection videos. Been working on this for a little while and we're in the S's, and thanks to everybody for commenting on all the previous videos. Just hit over 10,000 views from my channel and creeping up to 200 subscribers, so you guys all rule. If you like these collection videos, some of the cool people I've met through this channel have also been putting up some great collection videos lately. Speak Fanatic, aka Steve, has been putting up some really cool videos lately. CAV or Bust also has collection videos from past couple weeks. TJ Laser 81 posted a few things recently, and all those guys have some cool things on their channel, so check them out for sure. And of course, all the classics, Zaran Izarak. If you haven't seen any of his old Laserdisc videos, check those out. He doesn't collect anymore, but he has plenty of other Blu-ray things and fun stuff. And Cessna Ace is a master collector and has a lot of knowledge about the different pressings and the history behind the manufacturing of Laserdisc. So check his channel out too, and he's got tons of old ads, videos, and things like that. So if you're just getting into Laserdisc now, that'll keep you entertained for ages. And once I'm done with this collection, I've gotten some requests for some more kind of Laserdisc basics videos. So I'll do like a Laserdisc Essentials 101 type thing where I'll explain all the terminology that I throw around and everybody else who's into Laserdisc throws around if you're just getting into it. And then I've got lots of ads and updates and some spotlight reviews, so we're going to be busy for a while. So I left off at Stargate. So, you know where that's going. You know what's next. Think it through. Of course, it's Star Wars. And this is the first Star Wars Laserdisc I got. Columbia House, if you were a part of their club, you could get initially 3 discs out of a certain pile of selectable titles for $1 each, and then you had to promise to fulfill your membership by buying a certain amount of Laserdiscs over a year or two. But that was the best way to get the Star Wars series and like the Back to the Future series for $1 each. And I signed up and immediately said, I want all the Star Wars films. And this is actually a 1992 pressing from Mitsubishi. There is a lot of talk about this Laserdisc in general, and not back in the day, of course. Nobody ever, I think, noticed this when this was first released, but especially fans of what they call Gout or George's original unaltered trilogy, people that are trying to preserve as close as possible the original theatrical cut of Star Wars, have been collecting all these different sources and making their own cuts and Blu-ray archival copies that they trade online. And the people that were doing that and digging into this disc discovered that the aspect ratio of the film actually shrinks as it progresses. It's also known as the incredible shrinking aspect ratio. So it becomes less and less it becomes more and more widescreen as it goes on, but less and less vertical as far as the image goes. So, and I just watched this not that long ago. I'm gonna do a Laserdisc spotlight video on this, but you can actually see the image shrinking a little bit as the film goes on. It's pretty interesting stuff. That said, it doesn't have a lot of processing to it, so it still looks pretty nice and it holds up pretty well, even if you're projecting it on a pretty big screen. I do have to get the Japanese Special Collection Laserdisc for this. I only have the Return of the Jedi, and people are in love with those things now, which again I find hilarious, because when the definitive collection of Star Wars came out, people could not get rid of those Japanese Special Collections fast enough. But now it's the current thing, even though it came out in the late 80s. So I can't have that without having Star Wars. This is the Faces edition. This is the CLV counterpart to the definitive collection, the new THX remasters. And there is some processing on this sucker. You've probably seen some pictures online if you're a Star Wars Laserdisc fan of stormtroopers with 4 eyes because of motion artifacting and the programs they would use to kind of interpolate dirt and remove it, and they would also remove other things like people's legs and whatnot. It does have a interview with George Lucas on there. None of the other, none of the extras from the definitive collection are carried over, but it does have a pretty rollicking PCM surround track on there. And the Star Wars soundtrack has always sounded a little thin on home video, and this one's got a little bit more beef to it. I also, of course, had to have Empire Strikes Back, and these, Fox widescreen editions have killer artwork. Nothing against the Faces editions, but this takes the cake. That thing is gorgeous. Nice gatefold. This one does not have a shrinking aspect ratio, as far as I could tell. Again, also the 1992 Mitsubishi pressing. There was a 1993 Technodisc pressing of Star Wars that did not have the shrinking aspect ratio, apparently. But it also suffers from a lot of video crosstalk. So, it's, you're damned either way. Just have to deal with it. I also have, of course, the Faces version of The Empire Strikes Back. And, of course, it's got a face of a stormtrooper when there aren't really... Well, I guess there's stormtroopers in Cloud City. But it should be a snowtrooper, especially with the AT-ATs there. I don't know if it's an urban legend or not. But the rumor is that George Lucas used Lucasfilm... characters or just likenesses, so they wouldn't have to pay Mark Hamill or Harrison Ford any money. Again, another interview conducted by Leonard Maltin with George Lucas on there, and nice release. This looks a little different. The special widescreen edition of Return of the Jedi has a black border up top instead of that kind of battleship gray one, and mine's a little shop-worn, but it's still holding strong there. This is one of the versions of the film that it's actually vertically repositioned, so that even though it's just widescreen 2.35 to 1 like the rest of the films, it's actually repositioned up high, so there's only a thin black bar at the top of the frame, and then a huge black bar at the bottom of the frame. And all the Huttese dialogue and, Leia as Bausch, all that kind of alien dialect, all the subtitles are in the black bar below that. So, there's nothing actually superimposed over the image of the film itself. So, depending on what you're watching on, that might get lost in the shuffle, but... otherwise, cool release. Side 3's in CAV, so you can see all the big finale, Darth Vader action in slow motion. Of course, I also had to get the Faces version, and there's Yoda's mug all up in our grills. Another interview with Leonard Maltin, and George Lucas interviews are always kind of hit or miss, because he tends to recreate and remythologize his own life and his own, anything that he said in the 70s, he'll say that he didn't say, even though it's in print. And he seems to get annoyed when people say that he was influenced by certain Akira Kurosawa films. And if you've ever seen the Criterion Collection version of Hidden Fortress, he pretty much does backflips and does anything to deflect that he borrowed a lot of the elements of the Hidden Fortress for the core of Star Wars. And he's like, I don't even like Hidden Fortress, I like Seven Samurai. And I don't know, he's weird. He's just a contrarian, it seems like. I don't know, but I don't care. He can be as contrary as he wants, whatever. All right, we're out of Star Wars for a little bit. This is a flick that I totally fell in love with in the mid-90s. Came out, I believe it was 95, and Catherine Bigelow flick. Yeah, she was doing movies way before The Hurt Locker, and she was once hooked up with James Cameron, and even though they were already broken up at the time of this release, James Cameron and Jay Cox put together the screenplay based on Cameron's story, and it is a kind of paranoid Y2K thriller called Strange Days. Ralph Fiennes is awesome in this flick, so is Angela Bassett, Juliette Lewis, huge cast, Tom Sizemore, Michael Wincott's really cool in it, Vincent D'Onofrio's in it, but it's a very futuristic film, but not that futuristic because it's set at 1999 on the cusp of the year 2000. Such a great mood, great score with some Deep Forest and Peter Gabriel on there. Really not much wrong with the film. It's great. Highly recommend that if you're a sci-fi fan. This I didn't intend to pick up, but I happened to see it on a store shelf when I was at like a kind of sketchy used game place. while just wandering around trying to find Laserdiscs. And I found some Laserdiscs, and I picked up The Swarm. It was one of those super cast Irwin Allen flicks, following on the heels of, Towering Inferno and that kind of stuff. And it's killer bees. It's not really that exciting, but it's killer bees, so you got to have it. It's got Michael Caine in there as well. If you grew up in the 70s, you'll know that there was a huge chance of death by killer bees. Like if you grew up in the 80s, there was a 95% chance you were going to die in a horrific nuclear explosion. If you grew up in the 70s, there was a 185% chance of death by killer bees. And that was just a fact of life, and you had to deal with it. You were in the car, they were getting in the car, they were going to kill you. You were in your bedroom, they were going to put a pillow over your face and smother you to death. Anything, blanket parties, whatever, bees can do that. They get soap in a pillowcase and take you out in the middle of the night. So watch out for bees. They're still waiting. The 70s isn't over yet. They're still out there. This flick I got as a Punch-Out. It's from a Japanese director called Shimako Sato, who I don't think I've ever seen any of his other stuff. But it is a Julian Sands, Susanna Hamilton kind of languid, angst-filled vampire flick called Tale of a Vampire. It's funny, I got this thing for nothing from Tower Records, and my fiance was mentioning one time about this horrible vampire film that she saw that went nowhere and was just so boring and plotting, and I'm like, I think I know the one you're talking about. And I excused myself for a minute, and I came back down, and I'm like, was it this one? And she was like, yeah. So I'm forbidden from watching this with her, so I have to watch it late at night if I do. It's kind of like a near miss. Like it has a lot going for it, but it never quite connects. But it's kind of like an art house vampire movie, going for some of that Anne Rice aspects. But yeah, it's interesting. This film I saw in the theaters, and I've watched a billion times on Laserdisc. It is just a ton of fun. Rachel Talalay directs, and it's the first time I've ever seen Naomi Watts in a film. Lori Petty is just over the top and crazy, but it's great. Tank Girl. This may not be for everyone, but I don't know. There's not much not to love in this film. Malcolm McDowell is chewing up all the scenery. Ice-T plays an evil kangaroo. Actually, he's not really evil at all. There's some mutant kangaroo type people in here. It's a lot of fun. I never actually read the comic, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people distressed at the adaptation and how it was, mutilated or whatever, but this is a fun film. It was fun back in the day. It's still fun now. Great score, too. Great soundtrack. Courtney Love, of all people, kind of curated the score, so it's got the soundtrack, so it's got some Devo and stuff like that. Some Portishead in there. Really good stuff. This film is the one Jean-Claude Van Damme film that seems that Jean-Claude Van Damme haters, actually, they enjoy this film. And Time Cop is the flick. Mark Verheiden, who I believe did the, I think it was a Dark Horse Comics comic that he had done, did the screenplay. I actually had the script for this before I saw it, and it's not too bad. It still holds up pretty well, though his Jean-Claude Van Damme's Belgian accent is still pretty killer. There's a great scene earlier on where he goes to meet Mia Sara at a shopping mall, and there's a purse thief, and I just love the bit where he does this high kick and holds his foot directly in front of the kid's face, and he's like, what does it say? And he reads his boot, and it says Wolverine. And he's like, no, between the lines. I should get the F out of here. But the best line in the entire movie is when he sees the kid with the purse, and he's like, that purse doesn't look good on you. Yeah. You don't need to time travel to kill the English language. You could just do it right in the 90s. Sorry, Van Damme. I'm sure you're trying to speak English, but it's just hilarious. I love that line in particular. This is the ubiquitous disc and also VHS. This was in everybody's VHS collection, and I'm sure some people have it on DVD and Blu-ray as well. And it's very, very en vogue to hate this film post-1997. But James Cameron's Titanic is a really good film. Sorry, deal with it. I loved it. I saw it at least I probably saw it about 6 or 7 times in the theater. Bit of a history buff, so I was really just intrigued by the amount of research Cameron did, and I think it's a solid flick. I don't think there's any amount of ham-handed kind of James Cameron dialogue that can negate the awesomeness of this flick. So I know it's ubiquitous. I know it's a common, but still it's a brilliant transfer, great AC3 soundtrack on here. I think there's a DTS pressing that I don't have, but THX certified. I mean, this is a great looking disc. It was one of the best Laserdiscs ever. In fact, I got this right around the time DVD was rolling out. It took a long time for this film to come out on DVD, and I just remember thinking, wow, it's kind of ironic that Laserdiscs are looking the absolute best they've ever looked. This one's like super NTSC discs, like Fifth Element and stuff were dropping. But these were, at the top of their game at the moment when DVD was starting to come and take over the crown. So, kind of a bummer there. This film is one of my favorites. This copy, I got a used version at Laser Craze in Boston. So it's a little beat up and I got some bent edges and everything. But I don't care. It's awesome. Tombstone. This is the director's edition. And kind of ironic because word on the street is Kurt Russell's really the director of this film. George P. Cosmatos apparently only directed for a portion of the film, and Kurt Russell ended up doing all the reshoots and taking over the rest himself. That said, there's still a interview with George P. Cosmatos, and he takes you through some of the deleted scenes, and so there's just some decent extras on here for that. And what's not to love about Tombstone? Come on, man. Great cast, killer flick. Awesome. Must have on Laserdisc. This is another film that is in a ton of collections, so don't be amazed when you're disappointed, but it's Top Gun. Yeah, I know you have a copy. This actually was an ex-rental, so it's got this cheesy adventure sticker. I'll have to take care of that, and the spine here is a little worn, but this is the THX AC3 reissue, widescreen edition. It's also a gatefold, even though it's one disc, but yeah, you gotta have this. Gotta have Maverick tearing things up in his Tomcat. This is technically my fiance's Laserdisc. Got this new for her because she's in love with Patrick Swayze, even when he's in drag. And Tu Wong Fu, thanks for everything, Julie Newmar. Kind of lingers in the shadow of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert for drag queen movies. But it's got John Leguizamo in it. Can't go wrong with there. Wesley Snipes, however, doesn't make the greatest looking lady. But yeah, it's some silly fun. This film I picked up, I believe this was at Tower Records too. It's not a Punch-Out, but it was pretty cheap. It's a Steve Buscemi film that he wrote and directed called Trees Lounge. And pretty big like 90s indie cast in here. Chloe Sevigny, Mark Boone Jr., Elizabeth Baracco, Daniel Baldwin, Mimi Rogers, Debbie Mazar, Sam Jackson shows up. It's kind of like, like a languid kind of slice of life thing where there's a lot of characters that don't have a lot going on, but their lives are interesting enough. It's kind of, I feel like something along the lines of Station Agent. You'd probably dig this, though I think this is maybe not as heavy-handed as Station Agent was. But yeah, it's just, good mid-90s indie filmmaking. It's not going to blow your socks off per se, but it's definitely worth a watch. David Koepp, great writer. And kind of an underrated director. He's got some interesting things under his belt, including Stir of Echoes. But this one was pretty well received by critics, but it didn't really go over that well with the audiences, or it was kind of underseen. But The Trigger Effect with Kyle MacLachlan, Elizabeth Shue, and Dermot Mulroney. It's one of those, what happens when the power goes out kind of things, where society falls apart and relationships get all crazy and things get out of control. So this is actually a really cool flick to grab on Laserdisc. And you have to have this one too. Another James Cameron comment, but it's a killer release. True Lies, one of the earliest AC3 releases. I can't remember if it was the first. I know Clear Empires in Danger and this were very early AC3 Dolby Digital releases. THX pressing. Really, really nice transfer, and there's some versions of this that actually comes with an insert that tells you about what AC3 is and why you should care and all that stuff. But it's killer stuff. Still plays good today. And being a big fan of the TV show, I had to pick this up. A little bit of a curiosity, Twin Peaks. This is the international cut of the pilot. Not knowing what the TV show was going to do overseas, they actually made a version of the pilot that solves the mystery at the end. Though in typical David Lynch fashion, it just kind of obfuscates and creates more of a kind of Mulholland Drive-ish, like head-scratcher ending. And it definitely doesn't kind of connect with how the mystery went in the TV show itself. But it is, it's a pretty fascinating artifact for the fact that it's a Twin Peaks movie based out of the pilot. And Yeah, I had to have that. I still need to get the Blu-ray, even though it has some lip sync issues apparently. But I want to see the deleted Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me stuff. There's another one I had the script before the film came out. I went to go see it with a ton of like Twin Peaks freaks on opening night. And I was disappointed in some of the kind of funnier stuff in the script was left out. There's some good stuff with Chris Isaac and Kiefer Sutherland. And there was a great bit with a bellhop encountering a David Bowie just kind of walks out of a wall in a South American hotel. And so I was kind of disappointed some of that stuff disappeared. Yeah, it's interesting how there's almost like a new Twin Peaks. There's a whole set of new characters, FBI agents for the first portion of the film. And it takes a while before it reconnects with Agent Cooper and Laura Palmer. And very, very dark stuff. Way darker than the television show. This film is often maligned, but I love it, so I don't care what anybody says. Twister is a heaping helping of fun, and I think this captures the spirit of Michael Crichton's books better than most Michael Crichton adaptations. And yeah, it's the on-demand summer cheese, but it's such a great feel to this film, and it just captures that cool kind of summer vibe. And I don't know, there's so much it gets right. Under Siege, gotta have that in your collection. I was never really a big Seagal fan, but I saw this Andrew Davis flick, and Tommy Lee Jones is a great villain in it, and Die Hard on the Battleship. Yeah, this is, again, like, if you're not a Jean-Claude Van Damme fan, you'll probably like Time Cop. If you're not a Seagal fan, you'll probably dig Under Siege. This film I had on Laserdisc, and I got rid of it because I had the DVD special edition, and then I got it back on Laserdisc. Unforgiven, my all-time favorite Clint Eastwood film. This thing is killer. And I used to get in arguments with people all the time. I used to rent Laserdisc from a place, and there was a guy that was mad that A River Runs Through It lost the Oscar to this, and I drop-kicked him into another century. In fact, he'll probably be landing right outside the facility that used to rent the Laserdisc about a week or so from now, because he needed to be drop-kicked into the future for saying that A River Runs Through It deserved the Oscar over Unforgiven. This film is a freaking masterpiece, and I love it. And this is the squeeze version, which is not actually released to the general public. Only in Japan did they have anamorphically enhanced laserdiscs. If you have pretty much any DVD nowadays, it is formatted for widescreen television. So therefore, all the content is squeezed onto the 4:3 image, and then your TV unsqueezes it and maxes out the resolution. Whereas Laserdiscs, you had to zoom in on a widescreen television, and then you kind of lose some resolution. So there's a handful of these that were kind of pimped to promote a Toshiba widescreen television set. There was also some CRT tube TVs from ProScan and RCA that were widescreen, but it just never really took off with the American public. But they had a handful of Warner Brothers demo discs that you could get. If you bought a Toshiba widescreen TV, you would get one of these suckers. So I lucked into obtaining a copy of this. There's also The Fugitive and Free Willy and a handful of other titles out there, but this is the one I wanted to get. This is a pretty cool flick. One of those people messing with your lives situations. Kurt Russell, Ray Liotta, Madeline Stowe. Unlawful Entry. It was a Jonathan Kaplan flick, so good. This is like good stuff to have on Laserdisc. This is a really confounding flick. It's all over the map of Wim Wenders' film, and there's apparently a really long director's cut available overseas, so I do want to check that out sometime. But I got this at one of those sketchy, like, kind of used shops, so the guy will have like a dusty old like Super Nintendo cartridge and want like $80 for it, but he had a tiny amount of Laserdisc, and I got Until the End of the World. It's kind of a fascinating flick. It's almost like multiple films in one, and it's easier to fall in love with the kind of semi-futuristic romp through Europe early in the film, and then later on it turns into almost an entirely film altogether, set in the Australian outback, where Max von Sydow was a character kind of trying to read people's dreams. And yeah, a lot of crazy stuff in there, and a lot that it bit off. I'm not sure if it could chew it all, but it's pretty fascinating. This is a hot mess. Volcano. It's not really a volcano. It's just a bunch of magma in Los Angeles, and there's some pretty shoddy writing in this sucker too. But It's a DTS version. I got it for $5. I couldn't say no. So yeah, I'll watch Anne Heche and Tommy Lee Jones running around. But yeah, I just love like the bits where yeah, who is it? I think it's Anne Heche or her sidekick is explaining to Tommy Lee Jones what magma is. Like, come on, really? This guy doesn't know what that is? Whatever. There's a lot of really, really crappy writing in this sucker, but it's still fun to have. This is an uneven Walter Hill flick, but it looks gorgeous on Laserdisc. Wild Bill. Good cast, and, I always love Jeff Bridges. It never quite kicks into gear and never quite falls together, but especially in the wake of films like Tombstone and Quick and the Dead, but there's still a lot of zazz in this thing. And Walter Hill had a rough time in the mid-90s between this and Last Man Standing, finding connecting everything, but still definitely a gorgeous looking film. Definitely worth having on Laserdisc. If you're in the zone of wild things though, you're going to need The Wild Bunch. This is the director's cut. It hit art house theaters in the 90s, and they released it on Laserdisc. And this is a killer flick. William Holden, Ernest Borgnine, Warren Oates, and man, some Gatling gun massacring happening at the end. This is some Sam Peckinpah awesome sauce, and I highly recommend grabbing this. If not on Laserdisc, at least some format. And sorry, we can't make a disease because I don't have a copy of Zardoz. But that'll tie in with our W. Wizard of Oz. This is the end of my Laserdisc collection. I have this really old 1983 pressing, which I didn't really anticipate on buying. I'd just rather have the big box set. But it was part of a lot I had, and it was kind of old, and I'm like, yeah, I'll hold on to it for sentimentality's sake. But yeah, I wouldn't really go hunting out this pressing unless there's something super amazing about it that I don't know about. But anyways, thanks for hanging out, and thanks for trucking through all of my collection videos. Now that the collection's over, it's time to get right back into my Laserdisc because I've got updates galore and Laserdisc spotlights galore. But I appreciate everybody for commenting and just having a good time with all the other videos. I'm also having a good time with all of your collection videos out there. So cheers, and we'll see you very, very shortly for some more Laserdisc content, and who knows what else. So thanks.